All right, welcome back to the Soft Compound, episode number 2 of the new era. We're back, Jared and Zach, as always. And we were just kind of talking about this right before we hit the record button. I want to take a quick second, just thank everybody for watching the first pod. We took a kind of a break from making content, and it was pretty overwhelming, to be honest, the amount of views we got, and, just to support the comments on Instagram and YouTube and everything like that. Keep them coming. Let us know what you guys want to see. Our upcoming videos, we got a whole list, we got a whole sheet of different ideas. So we're gonna be ripping them out, and we got a heater coming today. We wanted to talk about, we did the year in review. We just wrapped up the season. We want to recap all of that. But now we want to talk about the FIA. They they have a lot of problems. They do a lot. Listen, so I was just kind of telling you, Zach, right before we hit the record button too. I think out of all the governing bodies of sports in general, the people who make the rules, the FIA has the hardest job. There are so many things that go into motorsport in general. They don't only do Formula One. They do the rally car and, a lot of other different classes of motorsport. And, there's a lot of things that come up that I feel like we got to talk about. We have some ideas, is maybe how they could fix it, or just we're kind of reviewing problems that they've had, challenges that we've faced. And like I said, they have a tough job, but there's a lot of different things that, as if you watch Formula One, there's so many things that come up during race weekends that they have to kind of handle. And we just kind of want to go over that, some of the mistakes that they made, some of the things that they do that doesn't make much sense. So yeah, excited to rip this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of before I think we get into it, for those, if you don't watch Formula One, FIA, as Jared said, their most prominent role is the licensing and sanctioning of motorsport. As he said, they're, or as some drivers refer to it as, they're the police of Formula One. They control, what happens on a race weekend, whether that's drivers getting penalties, teams doing things wrong that they shouldn't have after the race. There's tons of things that go into what the FIA has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So before I think, we talk about problems, as Jared mentioned, they probably have one of the hardest jobs in all of sports. You have umpires, you have referees, you have management, you have officials. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's easier to call a 15-yard face mask than it is to give a driver a 5-second time penalty for crossing, track limits 3 times.
There's a point I want to bring up too, is when they have to make calls during a race, most sports, when they make a call, play stops.
Yeah.
The game halts for a second. They have time to decide what the right call is. Formula One or motorsport, the race is going on. They have to make the call right now. It's very quick. They have to be very quick. And I think that's another reason why they have one of the toughest jobs. But keep going. Sorry.
No, and I was just, like Jared said, there's, in my opinion, no job that's really has that much pressure and weight, because at the end of the day, a 5-second time penalty can ruin a driver's race. Yeah. We talked about this I think more times than not throughout the last podcast. Is F1 is it's a game of seconds. It's a game of milliseconds. Yeah. If we're adding 5 seconds to a driver, we were talking about this last time. Pit stops, 2.3 to 3 seconds, big difference.
Big difference.
Add 5 seconds to that of not even touching the car, that could ruin race. That could put you from P1 all the way to P10.
Yeah, Zach, that's such a good point too, because when there's a face mask or a tripping call or whatever it is, it doesn't ruin the other team's game. No. But when you give someone a 5-second penalty for impeding in the pit lane or whatever it is, it might as well be 5 hours sometimes. Exactly. You know what I mean? So that's a really, really good point. Is every in-race decision they're making could potentially ruin a driver's race.
Yeah. And with that being said, creates issues, creates problems. Not everybody's perfect. Mistakes happen.
Yeah.
Being that I'm a Max Verstappen Red Bull fan, the biggest controversy of, I would say, in sports history that I've witnessed at the age of 24 is the 2021 Abu Dhabi World Championship race.
Yeah. Talking about ruining a race,
Yeah.
or affecting a race that affected a world title season.
And, we don't want to get into that.
Right. As far as opinions,
just opinions that are on all sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the middle. As a lot of people know, it ended up, ruining Michael Massey's career in Formula One. He got fired soon after the race.
It was like 3 days, right?
Yeah. And just to kind of clarify a little bit, after that race, Michael Massey was fired. The FIA dropped a 3,300-page document that pretty much explained every single rule that needed to be clarified, and was sent to all the teams. It's still 2 years from that incident. Still a lot of problems.
Right. So, like you said, no reason to get into opinions. I'm definitely in the middle too. There was definitely some issues with the decisions that were made. But where we kind of want to go with this is not the start of a reform of the FIA, but this kind of kicked them into gear to say, hey, we got to rewrite a lot of regulations. We have to maybe get rid of some people, maybe shake things up a little bit. Didn't they have 2 race directors after that for some time? They were like switching every race or something like that. So this caused a lot of change. And, you made a great point to start with this, because this is, where we kind of want to go with it. And this sparked a lot of change in the FIA. Yeah.
And it's really odd because there's a sense of, you kind of feel bad for Michael Massey in a sense, or at least I do. Again, just going back, he had to make that decision in the matter of 4.5 minutes. Mm-hmm. First off, Nicholas Latifi wrecked. Had to get that cleared up. Cars that were lapped, that's a whole other story. Some cars got to advance, some cars didn't get to advance. But the Michael Massey's decision was, do we want a world championship decided under a safety car, or do we want one lap to see what's going to happen?
One lap.
Lewis, we all know Lewis was on older tires. He didn't get the chance to pit. Max Verstappen, fresh new tires, got the chance to pit right behind Lewis. I get it. I agree. Messed up. But with that being said, I think that leads into, kind of the aspect of, Michael Massey's career was damaged because of 5 minutes of his life.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off it really quick, if you take out unless you believe in a conspiracy that Michael Massey was paid to make a certain decision, which is highly unlikely. Sorry, it's just highly unlikely. He made the decision he thought was best at that time, this is why you got to feel bad for him a little bit, because he made the decision that he thought was going to produce a fair and equal and whatever, because to be honest, if it was decided under a safety car, people would be saying it's not fair to Max. So you got to look at it that way too. And another point I want to bring up about how stressful this probably was, and they ended up getting rid of this, which is probably like one of the first changes they made, is he has both teams talking to him as he's making the decision. What sport do you know that the head coach or whoever, the team principal, obviously in this case, but like anybody from the team can talk to the person making the decision and influence what they're going to do, you know what I mean? Or potentially, you know what I mean? He's got Toto and Christian Horner screaming in his ears saying, no, this, that. Come on, dude. That's one of the first changes too that they made, is that's not allowed anymore, because that was weird. I don't know. As someone who watches primarily American sports, weird.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that you said that, because it's important to know that, if you've seen the video, the first thing you hear is Michael Massey saying, "Christian, give me a second. I'm trying to get this Nicholas Latifi wreck, fixed.
Yeah.
And that's, like Jared said, what other sport do you have two teams arguing with police that are trying to get the situation fixed and under control? And it's in my opinion, it's a tough decision. It really was. Again, we're not mentioning what we think was right or what was wrong.
It's a moot point. It was 2 years ago.
It's
Almost
we've
3 years.
moved on. There's like Jared said, that point in F1 was kind of the churning of the butter. It was time that things had to change. Drivers needed clarity, and there's still issues. There's plenty of things that happened throughout the year that we're going to get into, but we just kind of had to mention that.
Yeah.
In all honesty, we feel that that's kind of the starting point of when the FIA realized, like, hey, it's time we step up and we do something about it.
Right.
So,
right. It kind of sparked the new, not like a new generation of FIA or anything, but like this, the current FIA was built off of Abu Dhabi 2021.
Yeah.
And in our opinion, or my opinion, I'm assuming, yeah. So, like you said, that's the place to start. And we can go off from there.
let's do it.
So most of my examples are from this year, I'll say. Not most of them, all of them, but I think it paints a good picture. So I would say the main embarrassment that happened this year for the FIA was the 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So Alonso is given a 5-second time penalty for not lining up on the grid correctly. First of all, why is that a thing this year? It happened all the time where people aren't lining up on the grid correctly. Maybe I heard it's because of the bigger tires. They can't see the lines as well. Whatever. Just kind of wanted to bring that up. He's given a 5-second time penalty for not lining up on the grid correctly. He went to serve the 5-second penalty during pit stop, and a wheel jack, the thing that lifts up the car to change the tires, apparently touches the car too early before the 5 seconds is up. And then he's given another 10-second penalty. Same thing happened to Ocon the week before. But here lies the problem. They didn't announce this 10-second penalty until after the race, after the podium ceremonies. An hour after the race ended, they said, oh, yeah, we noticed he touched too early, another 10 seconds. Alonso is knocked off the podium. After celebrating on the podium with the trophy, everything like that, he literally has to walk it over and hand it to George Russell. Right. Again, stating the obvious, but if the FIA announced this during the race, Fernando Alonso would have had the chance to build up the gap from George Russell to 10 seconds, and he would have kept his podium. I will say in the end, they did. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. But this was also a management race for Fernando Alonso. He was managing tires. He was not battling George Russell. He said himself after, in a press conference or in a media interview, that if he knew about this, he would have just built up a 10-second gap. He wasn't, on the limit. He was managing tires. He was managing fuel. He was, just doing what he needed to do to bring the car home. So the FIA ends up restoring Alonso's P3 finish. I think it's like maybe the next day or like late that night. Was the next day?
I think it was the next day, yeah.
Yeah. So and here's why. So Aston Martin, right away, they appealed it heavily. They were able to come up with 7 different instances where a wheel jack touched a car too early for serving a similar penalty. So the FIA immediately said, okay, we're going to retract. We're going to give Alonso back the podium. In their official statement, they said they were not able to come up with an agreement, or they were not able to agree between all of them that the wheel jack touching the car too early constitutes work being done on the car, because technically the rule states that work cannot be done on the car before the 5 seconds is up. So this just makes no sense on so many different levels.
Yeah. I think it's really crazy too, because imagine George Russell.
Yeah.
He's thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was doing his post-race interview, and then he finds out that Fernando Alonso had an additional 10-second time penalty, and he got P3. And correct me if I'm wrong, but George was like, what? That's not right.
You're
And
100% right. He said this is Alonso's podium. This is
yeah.
Alonso's trophy. Yeah.
So again, it just shows you that it was an absolute cluster F word.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if I'm Fernando Alonso, I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, so if I'm getting a 10-second time penalty, how is that, how is that fair for me? Like that's just constantly going through his mind. How is it fair for me? How is it fair for me?
Right.
And I don't even remember, but if it was this year or last year, but it reminds me of Carlos Sainz finishing, I think P2, and he finds out that he has a 5-second time penalty, and it took him out of one of the podium spots, and he comes over the radio and sitting at the pit wall, and he's like, "No, we have to talk to them. We have to talk to them."
That was the stop inventing. That was that one, right? Yeah.
Yes, and it's in my opinion, that's like having a pitcher go, 7 innings shutout scoreless, and then you get pulled for no reason, and you end up losing the game. Like,
yeah,
it's just things that are kind of out of their control in a sense. Like Fernando's in the car. How does he know that what his team's doing? And I get it. It's a team sport, but in that instance, that has nothing to do with the race itself. Again, even if there was a slight touch, and I think it was like in the last second of the 5-second time penalty.
Oh, it was close.
He was preparing to get, and I understand you're not allowed to move, but I think it's just like you can move, but you're not allowed to physically be doing something on the car.
Right.
And so, like, if we're making the assumption, okay, well, 2 of the 4 of us feel that he was going to jack the car, and the other 2 are saying, well, I don't believe that they were doing anything. Why are you making that call that it's a 10-second time penalty? Yeah. Like, why? Right. That's my thing. If it's not a unanimous decision on what they feel was correct, why are we instigating a penalty on Fernando for something that they can't even agree on?
Right.
Right. So it's really frustrating. And as Jared said, this is just one of the instances that has happened throughout the year. So,
right. And another thing I want to say is, this time penalty was given an hour after the event ended.
Yeah.
How are you even able to affect the race result after it's over? Yeah. What other sport do you know? Let's talk about a predominantly European sport, tennis, right? Say the last, I don't watch tennis, okay, but say the last whatever exchange is done and the one guy wins, but then they look back a half an hour later and that ball actually was out, and now the other guy wins. That's not a thing. It's not a thing in any sport to alter the race result or the results of a game after it's over. It just doesn't happen. You look at the NFL all the time. There's a close game, close call, whatever it is. The next day on Twitter, there's all these little screenshots zoomed in. Oh, he was actually out of bounds, this and that. They're not going back and changing the game. You know what I mean? This is not, how is this even allowed? That's my big point is, how is this allowed? Like, I don't.
That's a great point, because even if, how many times have you heard an NFL team appealing a game? Let's talk about the pass interference call in, I think it was like 2014 or whatever, that broke the internet, that it was clearly pass interference and they would have had the ball at the 2-yard line and they probably would have scored. And you hear an NFL team appealing a call. When have we ever seen some, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We're going to give you that back, the win, after we knew we messed up. So
it's like sense.
It's almost like the FIA can do whatever they want. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Free for all.
So that kind of leads me into my next point about this whole thing. Is so Aston Martin appeals, right? They find 7 other instances right away, by the way, they find 7. So this clearly happens a lot, right? And 7 other similar instances where wheel jacks touch the car too early. And now the FIA is saying, well, let's take a step back. We don't even know if this constitutes work being done on the car. It almost feels like an excuse. I get it. They're going to rewrite the regs or whatever. But now this is like, okay, there's 87 instances of us not calling this, and now we call it now, and we give them the penalty now. We kind of need a, we need almost an excuse. It's not exactly an excuse, but it almost feels like one to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where they're like, okay, we don't even know. We can't even agree if this is actually work being done on the car. So yes, you can have the podium back. We're sorry. And it's like, they almost, I don't know. They almost just should have said like, I don't know. They needed a reason to give him the podium back, and that was their reason. So
And
it almost feels like a cop out a little bit. One other thing I want to say: this is Formula One. This is the pinnacle of motorsport. Why aren't these regulations ironclad? Like, I'm not saying that, like we said in the beginning, there are so many things that can happen. There are layers to this. You know what I mean? Different things come up that have never came up before. In my opinion, this is not one of them. A wheeljack touching the car too early. Aston Martin found 7 instances of this happening within 30 minutes. You know what I mean? Why isn't this ironclad? Why isn't the wording ironclad saying, okay, what is work being done on the car and what is not? It's not a basic thing, but it seems like something that should be handled. You know what I mean? Like, should be very tight, sealed. This is what it is, and this is not what it is.
And
I
so
don't know.
I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning is if we're writing a 3,300 word document that's stating all of the rules and regulations, why is there still questions?
Yeah.
Why is the document that's stating clarity not giving teams clarity?
Yeah.
So, and again, it's hard to put in words exactly what is going to happen and what the outcome should be.
Right.
Because as you mentioned, things happen throughout the year that are particularly odd. Let's go back to Max completely just passing cars on the right, leaving the pit lane.
Right.
Is that legal? Some think it is. Some think it isn't. Is there a rule in F1 that says you can't do it? No.
So technically, yeah, right. That's the thing. It's like there's no rule against it, so you can
Can
do
we
it, I
do it?
guess. I guess. Like, why isn't this tight? Why this is the pinnacle of motorsport. Maybe if there's a new class of motorsport, I don't even know if this is like, it's not really a thing for new classes of motorsport to come out like that frequently, but maybe if this is Formula One's first year ever, maybe they don't have some of these things, down. But how long has Formula One been around? How many times has someone had to serve a 5-second penalty during a pit stop? This is regular stuff. You know what I mean? This should be very tight, in my opinion, and it's just not. It's not. And I forgot to show what I have behind me, but I feel like it's a good example, a good time to do it. FIA sucks. They don't suck. So it's just funny.
I think that it's that kind of leads me into kind of a topic that I want to talk about is something that happens regularly on a race, and that's track limits.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest question mark in a race. I mean, you have the line that states if you have 2 wheels on the track within the confined lines of the racing strip, you're within track limits. After COTA, Circuit of the Americas, major controversy came up with the FIA dropping a statement that certain tracks have to fix their track limit issues. Why is this a thing now? What like, why now? So just kind of an instance in Qatar, there were over 175 warnings combined for all drivers whether that was a warning, a time penalty.
Black
More
and white
times
flag,
than not, the drivers will get, sometimes 3 warnings.
yeah.
It's usually 2, but sometimes they'll get 3.
I think they sometimes it'll be like 2 and then they'll get the black and white flag, which
Yeah.
means like basically, one more and we're giving you a penalty. But yeah, why now? Why like one thing I do want to bring up about track limits too. You're talking about warnings in the race. Let's talk about qualifying for a second.
Yeah.
You know how annoying it is to watch these qualifying sessions where Checo takes pole, lap deleted. Lando takes pole, lap deleted. Like there's like 80 lap deletions in a qualifying session. Like, let's talk about, spectators and people watching. That's not enjoyable.
Yeah.
That's not enjoyable at all. Maybe a few track limits makes it a little bit interesting, but when there's track limits every 2 minutes, every minute, every lap someone's putting in, they can't keep it in the white lines. I don't know. It's just not fun to watch, in my opinion.
And you definitely have, kind of the bare-boned people that are like, well, that's on the drivers. Keep it on the track. Okay. What if we're talking about, perfect example, Coda. Turn 4 to 7 is a chicane that you can take at 165 miles an hour. And if we're talking kilometers per hour, I don't even know the translation there, but quick.
Very fast.
And so if we're looking at a chicane, we got straight, a little bit of a curve going back into a high straight high straight.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to keep a rocket ship in between? And this is exactly what I wrote down. Drivers experience track limits, warnings, and penalties throughout many races, but Coda was just as bad, specifically on turn 6 through high-speed corners, turn 4 through 7. Turn 6 had 71 warnings handed out in the race. 71.
Crazy, bro.
71. You're telling me you have an FIA person just sitting looking at a camera on turn 6? Like, I get it. There's, these cars are essentially computers. The FIA has, they'll get a notification or whatever you want to call it. It'll pop up on their screen saying, car number 1, all 4 tires left the track.
Right. They have like little sensors, but still.
Yes. And in all honesty, like, that creates a bigger problem in itself, because if we're going to give out warnings and we're going to give out penalties, we have to be sharp and make sure 1,000% that every car we're giving a penalty to was outside those track limits within 3 times.
Yep. And if it's going to be this strict, don't miss any. I'm not saying they do.
So that's the thing. Yeah. They did miss some. And that's what created a ton of hate for the FIA. A statement from Lewis Hamilton. This can no longer be tolerated. Why is it? And I saw the video. Sergio Perez crossed turn 6. I think it was like 12 times in the race. He left. His entire car was off the track 12 times on turn 6. Just on turn 6. We're not talking about any other turn. Just turn 6.
Right.
And he did not receive a time penalty.
I was going to say, this is reminding me too. Do you know how many times you hear a driver over the radio when they're chasing a car? Checo's going out of turn 6. Checo's going out of turn 6.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think that is a great point, because, if we're gonna bear down on track limits, that's fine. That's fine. It is what it is. But the FIA had the balls to drop a statement saying that LaSalle, and not even just these two, but I read that these two were included. Tracks like LaSalle and the Red Bull Ring have to figure out their track limits problems, or else they could potentially be removed from the calendar. You're going to tell me we're going to remove Red Bull's home track because we've been racing at the same track for how many years now, and just now in 2023, they have to fix the problem. It's not us. They have to fix the problem.
Right.
So it seems like a bit of an scapegoat to me. If we're going to bear down, let's compare it to baseball. If what's a strike and what's not a strike, it's
Right.
all human error. An
Mhm.
umpire makes mistakes. But at the same time, if we're going to crack down on this has to be the correct call, we have to make sure we're staying within the confinements of where the strike zone is. It relates to F1.
Yeah.
Like, we can't go and blame the teams because, you got to tell your players that they have to stop complaining or else they're going to get ejected because of a ball that was called 5 feet off the plate as a strike.
Yeah.
It's human error. We can't crack down on things like this. Like, it's super frustrating. And like Jared said, like, if I'm watching a qualifying and I see Lando Norris take pole in Q2, I'm screaming. And at the end of it, lap time deleted. It's like, well, I just wasted 4 seconds of my life cheering for something that didn't even happen.
Didn't even happen. That's the thing. It's like it's very frustrating to watch. And, I don't know what the answer is. I'll play devil's advocate just for a second. Maybe it is the track. But here's what I want to say first, actually, is you were talking about there's people, oh, keep it in the track limits. When I think those people don't understand what it means to be on the limit when they say, oh, he's on the limit. He's on the limit of like the car. If he pushes the throttle any more down, the car is going to spin out. It's not just they got to steer a little more. They are legitimately on the limit of the car going into the wall. You know what I mean? So it's not like, oh, he just got to take the turn differently. It's like they are competing for milliseconds, thousands of seconds. They have to be on the limit to get a qualifying result. You know what I mean? It's not like they just need to steer a little more. That's not how this works. So I just wanted to say that when people are saying, oh, just keep it in the limits, it's not
Well,
that simple.
so it's super, super interesting that you just said that because I don't know if you saw about a week ago, um, Alex Albon did a one-on-one private, interview. And the question came up, how is it being Max Verstappen's teammate?
Yep.
And he goes, well, it's kind of interesting because Max is one of those drivers. He goes, my driving style is smooth to try and find the limit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Max Verstappen, who drives to find his limit. And then from there on out, when he knows how the car feels, every single race, he is trying to one up, getting quicker in a certain corner,
Yep.
and yes, that goes to all the sim he does. That's not my point. If we're talking about the 20 best drivers in the world and they're trying to go through a chicane, you think they want to hit the brakes? Like you genuinely think that they want to hit the brakes and take the corner as slowly and smooth as possible to stay within the track?
Yeah.
No. No. Like, if we're trying to maximize our car, maximize our lap times, you want to find the line that shortens the track as much as humanly possible. And if we're pushing that car to the 110% that the car can give you, more times than not, you're going to run outside the boundaries.
Yeah.
And
That's the thing.
so, like, my question to that, argument is, would you rather see a car take a corner at 70 miles an hour, or would you rather see a car take a corner at 140? Because
Right.
if you're asking me, I want to see 140.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I think that leads us into a good point about this thing is the FIA needs to find the solution. They're not saying Red Bull Ring, figure it out or you're gone. Like that seems like a cop out, like you said. I think they have to work with the tracks and say, hey, what can we do here? What, maybe we can, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but the FIA has to be on the forefront of the problem. They, like you said, they are the governing body of Formula One and other motorsport, but we're talking about Formula One. They are the police. They also, their job is to make sure the race goes smoothly. You're watching these qualifying sessions at Red Bull Ring and Qatar, they're not smooth. They are clunky as it gets.
And
And that's their
in
fault.
100%, I agree. And to be honest, this may sound stupid, but I think they did it this year on a track. Why don't we just extend the lines? Because technically, if your car has two wheels on the line, you're still within the limit.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember what track it was, but they did it this year. They like after practice one, the next day, like the lines were extended by like I think it was like 2 inches or something.
I think
Why
that's all
don't
they
we
have
just
to
do that?
I think that's all they'd have to do.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
right, right. And
So
yeah, I guess that goes back to saying maybe the tracks should just do that, but it's the FIA who is calling the track limit penalties. They have to work with the tracks. They can't just be like Rebel Ring
telling
figure it out.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I couldn't agree more.
So
Couldn't agree more.
I mean, a lot of things happen within the track that we just talked about. Lots impeding the pit lane, doing things that we're not supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
and more times than not, it's hard to in our reality. Oh well, I shouldn't say that. It's not hard to get a fine in Formula One, but you kind of have to do something really bad in order to get a fine.
Mhm.
And back in October, the FIA released a statement out of the middle of nowhere that stewards can impose a maximum fine of $1 million on drivers now. A lot of the drivers were super confused. Came out of left field.
Yeah.
Some quotes, some drivers were saying it's ridiculous, it's scary, it's not appropriate.
Yep.
What do we have to do to impose getting a penalty that bad, a fine that bad? Before the maximum penalty they could get was $250,000. Huge lump sum of money, I get it. But if we're talking F1, not
They're
much.
doing all right in the bank account,
We're getting into the millions. I get it. Other sports,
a million's a lot.
million, NFL, they give $1 million fines. Baseball, they give $1 million. It doesn't happen much, but they do.
Yeah.
And
But I feel like even in other sports, they give the fines to the organization.
exactly.
They're not saying, Dak Prescott, you owe us $1 million now.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they do. Maybe there are instances of that. But I feel like more often than not, it's a Dallas Cowboys, you got to pay the NFL $1 million now because you did this, or whatever. But like, there's plenty of instances where Max gets a fine and he's talking about, oh yeah, I had to write him a check. I hope they get a nice dinner tonight or whatever. It's like, yeah, it's coming out of the driver's bank account. That's also a weird thing. I just wanted a little sidebar, but yeah, it's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah. And so, as mentioned, the drivers were super confused. They felt that the reasoning was super vague.
Mhm.
Here's what the FIA official statement was. This measure is to prevent drivers or teams from committing truly egregious acts. From my 5 years of following Formula One, what do we consider an egregious act?
Purposely wrecking into someone? I don't even know.
Okay, but have we ever seen somebody? It's not NASCAR.
That's what I'm saying. That's
in
what I'm saying.
NASCAR, we see cars completely, like literally leaving the racing line to hit some dude and wreck them, and they don't care if it ruins their race.
Right.
You're not going to see Lewis Hamilton go up to Max Verstappen and completely wreck him. First off, there's a line of respect.
Yep.
They all are essentially are doing the same thing. They are doing this, not essentially. They are doing the same thing.
Mhm.
Open wheel racing.
Yep.
How easy is it for a mistake like that to happen for a driver to get killed? Pretty high of a chance.
I was going to say that's the point I wanted to make. Go ahead.
No,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm not saying NASCAR is not dangerous, but I think Formula One is more dangerous. Like they're going faster. The tracks are not ovals. Open wheel racing, right? There's no shell around them. Like it's stuff. They have a halo, but like, I don't know. It's definitely more dangerous. That's whatever you said it, but yeah.
And so like if we're like breaking down like an egregious act, like it's really hard for me to find an instance that would cause $1 million fine. Like,
Yeah.
like if more times than not, when you see somebody wreck, it's one, because of mechanical issue, two, because they're trying to shoot the gap and they shouldn't have, or
Yep.
three, it's something that is a complete mistake. Like,
Yeah.
they touched and caused too much damage for both cars to retire. Like, I have never seen anything that would be egregious enough to cause $1 million fine. And in some, instances, even $250,000. Like, so
I think you're making a good point, because you can't say egregious and just that. Say egregious and then have a list of things that will get you $1 million fine. Because like, we're talking about $1 million here. I get it. F1 drivers are doing fine financially, but this is a big deal. This is not small potatoes here. You know what I mean? Even to them, you have to list out what is going to get you $1 million fine. Especially this is Formula One. Everything should be ironclad. I'll go back to it. Everything should be set in stone, written.
clarity.
Yes,
Clarity.
we need clarity from the FIA.
And in all honesty, there's our title of this video.
Yeah.
There's no clarity. There's like in anything. And some people are going to defend the FIA. And we want to know what you guys think. Leave a comment below on what you think. Do you feel that the rules are set in stone and have been for a long time and the drivers should know? Or are you guys on our side where you feel that, like Jared said, everything needs to be set in stone and clear for the teams, the drivers, on this is caused and you will get a penalty of this amount due to this and because of other things.
Yeah.
So
and it's a good point. Talking about leaving comments. Anything we're talking about here, please let us know what you think in the comments. Shoot us a DM, shoot us something. We'd love to engage. We'd love to talk to you guys. We'd love to see what you guys think. We're throwing out some opinions. Let us know. Okay. Let us know what you think. That's all.
Absolutely.
But yeah. Anything else on track limits? What you got for me?
No, not on track limits. I'm done with that. You said I was getting loud. The voice was starting to get raised. I'm starting to sweat a little bit.
I
Woo!
love it, brother.
Started,
seriously, go off, dude. That's the thing.
No, go ahead, Jerry.
I was just gonna say, I think it shows how much we like the sport. We're very passionate about the things we're talking about. And we have obviously opinions, but backed up by facts. And I love it. I love it.
And so, there's many, other instances, the Leclerc scream, signs, yelling at the FIA, telling his team to figure it out and talk to them. And, sometimes you have drivers yelling at their team to talk to the FIA while they're going 170 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
it's really a tough job. And I know we keep bouncing back and forth on, they do these things wrong, but it's a tough job. But, at the end of the day, like, the FIA is still growing. They're still trying to figure out, what's right and what's wrong. And, they are still trying to improve. I was just telling Jared before, after the Qatar race, there was 7 drivers that went into the medical tent. Terrible. That can't happen. That can't happen.
You got Lance Stroll passing out on straights. You got Ocon throwing up in his helmet. That was bad. That was bad.
I mean, look at the post race. Lewis couldn't even stand up. He literally couldn't even stand up. He was sitting down in the background while Lando Norris is giving, his speech. Max Verstappen's sweating absolutely profusely. And you see him like going up to his team, like kind of just hugging them. Like, that's a whole other, story for another time. Is when should races be, when should they race in Qatar? When should they race in Miami? When should they race in Bahrain? That leads to the next point. Does the map, or I mean the schedule of races makes sense.
Right.
We got flying to the US, flying back to Europe, flying to Singapore, flying back to the US.
Yeah.
It's,
I think, right. That's a good point. And, we didn't even talk about this before we, when we kind of planned this whole thing out. It's ridiculous how much they travel. The only thing they do well is there's a European leg where they do a lot of European races in a row. But other than that, they're going from Texas to Japan, back to Miami. But this isn't in order or anything like that, but they're flying all around the world. Why? I get it. There's weather things that we have to take into account, but it can be better than this. We can definitely do better than this.
And that more times than not, a lot of people think that, they're only there for 4 days. That's not true. When we have back-to-back weekends, the entire team is packing up from the weekend, putting everything on a plane, flying thousands of miles to the next city or country, unloading everything, preparing for Friday.
Yeah.
So,
they're there the whole week. Yeah.
Those guys don't get to see their families for months.
Right.
And it just, to me, it would make more sense if they just would figure out something, that a calendar that would be more beneficial to save money, and two, just save yourself from the extra jet lag that's not needed.
Right.
Right. And I know that this is just stupid complaints, but it all goes into the FIA. They're in charge.
100%. And hey, you want to talk about, emissions and fossil fuels and whatever, all that stuff too? You're burning a lot of gas, you know what I mean? Going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. And like you said, that's a good little thing to throw in here, because this all goes back to the FIA and Formula One, figuring it out. And the FIA working with the Formula One as a company, figuring out the calendar, figuring out what they need to do to improve this. One thing that you made a really good point before we kind of started talking about this is that, we're going back and forth. It's a really tough job, but they're doing all these things wrong. It's a tough job doing these things wrong. First of all, I think we're being very fair. I think we're not completely ripping on the FIA. We're giving them the roses where they deserve it. But there are things that need to be fixed. And speaking of giving roses, they are evolving. If they weren't evolving, making changes, making updates, they would be doing an even worse job. You know what I mean? They're doing their job by changing things, by, changing race directors and improving. They are improving, but these are things that they need to improve on in the future, Yeah.
For not only, in all honesty, like, if you're somebody that's never watched a Formula One race before and you're sitting there watching a qualifying, you're going to have no idea what's going on. No idea.
Yeah.
Like, and if you're sitting there with somebody who does know what they're talking about, and you're looking at them and they're cheering over a lap, and then 5 seconds later you see them screaming at the TV, "Why is that taken away? Why is that deleted?" You're understanding what we're talking about.
Exactly.
There's a lot that goes into it. There's going back to Michael Massey. It's they have 72 laps to be absolutely perfect.
No.
Kind of impossible.
It's impossible. There are human error decisions. This is not all computers and science and data based. There are, and going back to a point that I made, it's like most sports, when a call is made, play stops. They say, okay, flag on the play. The referees all talk to each other and say, okay, this is what I had. This is what you had. Everybody, okay, this is the call. It couldn't be more opposite in our scenario. The race is going on. Everybody is going 200 miles an hour, and they got to say, wait, hold on, penalty here, penalty there. It's tough. It's tough for sure.
And that's a great point, because if they're looking at something that happened 20 seconds ago, trying to focus on what happened 20 seconds ago, not even paying attention to what could be happening while they're trying to figure out a time penalty.
Exactly.
So I get it. There's a lot of, FIA officials during a race that are, I'm sure every driver has, one person that's watching them throughout the race. And I could be totally wrong. I could, just be talking out of my ass here, but it would make sense.
It
It
would
would
make
make
sense.
total sense.
Yeah.
And if it's not, there's your answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
um,
So
real quick, sorry, Jared, just
no, you're
to say
go
this
off,
though,
brother. Go off.
I kind of want to go back to the Qatar, kind of the point. I kind of went off track there, but they are improving. They are trying to make the drivers' lives easier. As I mentioned, 7 drivers went into the medical tent after Qatar race.
Yeah.
Not even an hour and a half after the race, the FIA dropped a statement saying that they will be inserting a small scoop designed to direct cool air into the cockpit for all drivers, and it is mandatory for 2024.
Love it.
I kind of just want to touch on that quick. I think it's extremely important. Driver safety is the number one. Above anything is driver safety.
What are we doing this for if the drivers aren't safe? Right.
Exactly. And, some teams might not be happy with it because it adds weight.
But it's weight for everybody.
It's weight for everybody. Exactly. And, you got drivers like Kimi Räikkönen and as Jared said, Logan Sargent. Shout out to
Happy birthday, baby.
Birthday today. He doesn't even race with a water bottle. So if we're talking, something that probably is beneficial for everybody in the long run, this is a good start.
Yeah.
This is a really good start. So
Definitely.
I wanted to add that in there.
I got something that I could talk about, and it kind of, so we're talking, it's a tough thing. It's a tough gig, right? But I want to highlight one decision that they made that just makes no sense. It just makes no sense. And I kind of have this titled on my, sorry to jump ahead too. Do you have anything else?
I'm good, buddy.
No, yeah, sorry. Because I think this is like, I want to bring up like the contrary now, like an instance where they're just focusing on the wrong things. Sometimes I think they kind of have their heads in the wrong places as far as things, different decisions that they're making, things that they're thinking about. I want to talk about, so one of the first points that we brought up was the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where they couldn't figure out the podium until an hour after the race. And then, well, in all reality, a day after the race, because that's when the final decision was made. There's so many regulations that they need to refine, right? And we're talking about, they're evolving, they're doing this, right? But I want to talk about an instance where they're focusing on the totally wrong thing. A couple days after they figure out this podium for Saudi, FIA puts out a statement that to all the teams saying any team personnel seen climbing the pit wall during checker flag celebrations will result in a penalty. Why? This has happened every F1 race in history. The FIA stated that this stems from team personnel climbing the pit wall in Bahrain and Jeddah. So there was 2 races in the seasons thus far. And then they put out this statement. So this decision stemmed from these 2 races. What do you mean? It's happened every race in F1 history. They get your driver wins. All the guys are out there hanging over. Yay. I get it. It's dangerous. If something happened to be horrific, it'd be the worst thing to ever happen in Formula One. But they have 200 issues that they need to solve before this one, in my opinion. And, announcing this right after the embarrassment that was, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, where they couldn't figure out the podium until an hour after the race. I'll say it again because it was so ridiculous. It just shows they're focusing on the wrong things. I could understand if this was something in the works and they're just kind of refining the statement they want to put out, and they were thinking about this last year and this and that, but they literally said that this stems from Bahrain and Jeddah. Like, what are we doing?
That's super interesting to me because, as you mentioned, it's been a part of, Formula One forever.
Yeah.
What happened, during that celebration?
Right.
And
Or
can we talk about, I think, was it last year when Alex Albon entered the pits at as fast as you're allowed to go, and there's a dude standing right next to the pit lane?
I
Can we talk
forgot.
about that? And that's not,
Like
that's a safety
cross
issue.
he crossed the pit lane, right? Like right before he came in. Crazy, bro.
So I mean, it's just, the question to me is, like you said, like kind of the embarrassment of, the Fernando Alonso situation, then dropping that. What happened in Bahrain and Saudi that, caused an uproar of something that has been tradition for years and years and years.
Exactly.
So,
It's weird. Just
as
weird.
as Jared said, like it's, focusing on things that just don't need to be focused on. Like,
Yeah.
no wonder you have so many drivers that just constantly complain about F1.
Yeah.
Probably for good reasons.
Right.
Because, their argument is, I'm out there trying to win a race, maximizing the car's potential, while you're sitting behind a desk watching me do it and telling me what I'm doing is right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
So, it's the FIA is needed, but at the same time, it's gotta, I don't even know the word. It's gotta figure out, kind of what's absolutely most important.
Yeah.
I think. And yeah, maybe you want to get rid of that rule in the off season. Fine, whatever. Who cares?
Right.
But like 2 races into the season, like, and
And,
that's
and,
what you're
and
gonna ban.
right.
So
Especially after the monstrosity that was the Jetta podium. This
like
is what you're
imagine
doing?
being a driver. Like after every single debrief with the FIA, I would just feel like what now? Like
Yeah.
what else are you possibly going to do that's gonna mess up our strategy that day? Or Jared and I were talking about this before, like there was an issue with Pirelli tire in the middle of the season that came out of nowhere, like absolutely nowhere. And something must have caused an issue between the Pirelli and F1 or FIA. They were very vague on like what actually happened. But then 3 weeks later, they signed a max contract to extend with Pirelli for the next, whatever, how many years. But
Right.
it's just like, and I get it, different media outlets cover different parts of the sport, and they drop different, this article is talking about F1 and this article is talking about the FIA, and because a lot of people don't understand those are two separate entities. Like the F1 is ran by the FIA.
Right.
So a lot of people don't get them mixed, that they're the same thing. They're not the
F1
same
is a
thing.
company.
Yes.
FIA is the governing body of F1.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, just like the little kinks need to be sorted in our opinion. There's more to racing that the fans want to see. That it's almost like the dad that's taking away all the fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And like you said, they're necessary. Obviously, if we had no rules, this wouldn't be a sport. This is a sport of rules and technicalities. But it seems like a lot of the times they're focusing on the wrong things. They're making weird decisions that don't really make any sense. Nothing's not nothing, but there are a lot of things that are not clear. Clarity, like you said, clarity could be the title of this whole episode, you know. So like you said, yeah, I think there are a lot of things that need to be cleared up, and they're evolving, they're doing it, but sometimes their head is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was and again, like if you guys know of any instances that happened that just absolutely infuriated you, leave it down in the comments.
Let us
Send
know.
it to us. We'll talk about it.
I was gonna say we'll make a quick little Instagram reel, whatever, just addressing what you guys want to hear. We want to be in touch with you guys as a community. You know, We want to hear from you guys what you think and what we can do better, just like the FIA.
So, real quick, I want to add this. I wasn't telling Jared this.
Oh,
But if you listen to this video, this podcast, and you made it this far, I want you to drop down in the comments. Just a quick thing. Which drivers do you think are not going to have a seat in 2025? We'd like to hear that.
Yep. I'd love to hear that. I would love to hear that.
That's definitely going to be one of the things we talk about here very soon.
What is it? 14 drivers have contracts that are expiring next
14.
year. Yep.
So let us know what you think. Who do you think's gonna, re-sign with a team? Who do you guys think might potentially sign with somebody else?
Yep.
Let us know.
Let us know. That would be awesome. Yeah, I think we should rip an episode on that very shortly. Maybe we get some comments and we filter them in. We see what people are thinking, and we'll do it up. So yeah.
Yes,
But dude, I think this was a great episode. Just kind of, well, obviously. No, I'm kidding. But no, like I think we covered a lot as far as FIA, and we find who they are. Obviously, for people who don't know, we started with Abu Dhabi, which like I said, I think that really kicked off a lot of these changes, and we just went over some of the things that stuck out to us. Is bad decisions, good decisions, the cooling in the car. We were very fair. And then decisions that just don't make any sense, So, dude, yeah, this was sweet.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You got anything else, brother?
Nothing. Just if you made it this far, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Seriously, I want to thank everybody again for the performance on the first video.
Yeah. And
Really
like we're learning, as we go. So if there's anything you guys think we need to do better or you guys want to hear us talk about, just let us know in the comments.
Exactly.
We're an open book. Jared and I know we keep saying we are absolute nerds about this sport.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll be interesting to see what some of you guys actually have to say.
Yeah, definitely.
But I know we had some comments on the Max Verstappen edit that Jared dropped, and we had some people saying that they were Ferrari fans. Just seeing that it was greatness, and seeing that other teams are being able to respect that. It's pretty cool to see. So,
100%. Yeah, like you said, keep the comments going, like, share, subscribe, all
yes,
that.
Sir.
All that stuff. Cool, man. I think if you're good, we can get out of here. We'll get this posted up, and yeah, we'll keep rolling. This is awesome. I love
Pod
it.
2, check,
baby, check. And yeah, we're gonna get off here. We'll probably quickly plan the next one, and we'll be rolling again soon.
Yes, sir.
Sir. All right, guys.
Alrighty.
Thank you very much. Peace. The free go.